Have you ever wondered why some people turn to philosophy? For me, it started when I was just a little boy. I always felt that just existing, being here, was somehow strange. I mean, here we are, alive and aware. Isn't that kind of odd? Of course it is. But what do I mean by odd? Well, something odd stands out. It's different. It catches your attention. In contrast, things that are even seem flat or ordinary. But you can't notice something unusual unless you have something normal to compare it with. It's like looking at a mountain. You only see it because there's flat land around it. In the same way, each one of us is unique, strange, and different. But how do we even know we're different unless there's something uniform in the background, like space or silence? This kind of thinking gives you what I call a philosophical itch. You start asking, why is it like this? But after thinking for a while, you realize maybe that's not the right question. Maybe it's not why, but how. That question leads you toward science and other kinds of exploration. Eventually, you might find yourself asking, what is this whole thing we call existence? And if you keep asking that question long enough, something strange happens. You realize that even if you found the answer, you wouldn't know how to explain it. When we study nature, we do get some answers, but they often lead to even more questions. So let me ask you, have you ever paused and asked yourself, what is existence really? All the answers we find about the world, through science or observation, are always in terms of patterns, structures, and forms. These patterns can be measured, studied, and even predicted. But when we stop and ask, what are these forms actually made of? What is this really? We hit a wall. There seems to be no clear way to answer that. To explain what something is, we usually put it into a category. We ask, is it animal, vegetable, or mineral? Is it male or female? Republican or Democrat? Christian, Hindu, or something else? We define things by placing them in boxes, by comparing them to what they are not. Every time we ask, what is it? We're really just trying to find where it fits, what group it belongs to. But that leads to a deeper question. What is the group of all groups? Once we ask that, we realize we can't imagine what would be outside that group. There's no way to compare it to anything else. So in the end, we can't truly answer the question, what is it? That's why physicists eventually gave up on trying to find the stuff of the universe. Instead, they started describing reality in terms of form, not substance, but patterns and relationships. But then people ask, okay, sure, there's a pattern. But what's the pattern made of? And again, we find ourselves back at the same mystery. So here's something to think about. Can we ever truly know what reality is made of, or are we just seeing the shapes it takes? Surely there doesn't have to be a final answer to all of this, right? Because when you zoom in close, when you turn up the microscope, what we think of as stuff starts turning into form. It becomes more detailed, more structured. For example, a carpet may look like simple material to the eye, but if you look at it under a microscope, you'll see the tiny crystals that make up the nylon or whatever it's made from. Then we ask, okay, but what are those crystals made of? So we zoom in more and find molecules, zoom in again and we find waves, patterns of energy. But then we still ask, what are these waves made of? And that's the mystery, because they're not really made of anything. The deeper we look, the more stuff disappears. We're left with patterns, with movement, with form, but no solid substance. Now here's something interesting. When we say, does it matter? We usually mean, is it important? But the word matter actually comes from a Sanskrit root, matra, which means to measure. From matra comes the word maya, often translated as illusion, but it also means magic or creative power. Even the word illusion comes from Latin, ludere, which means to play. So maybe life isn't something solid to be figured out once and for all. Maybe it's something to experience, something to play with. Like music. Good music doesn't need to point to anything else. It doesn't need a deeper meaning beyond the beauty of the sound itself. So here's a question for you. What if life is less about finding solid answers, and more about learning to enjoy the rhythm, the pattern, and the play? You don't ask a musician, what do you mean by this music? What are you trying to express? Because the music is the meaning. You just listen. That's the answer. The same goes for life itself. Giraffes are giraffing, trees are treeing, stars are starring, clouds are clouding, and rain is raining. Everything is simply being what it is. And if that sounds confusing, just look again. It's all right there in front of you. People are people too. Wow. We notice that all these expressions of life, all these suchnesses, appear and disappear. They're always changing, coming and going. But here's where we get stuck. we become attached to our particular form. We start to think of ourselves as something separate from what we're doing, when in truth, you are your doing. You are your activity, your process, your living. Yet for some reason, we tell ourselves that we must make this go on for as long as possible. We think we have an instinct to survive, that survival is the ultimate goal. In fact, most people agree on at least one moral idea today, that we should survive. So we divide our actions into those that help survival and those that don't. But when you tell yourself, I must go on living, you trap yourself in a strange loop, a double bind. Because you're demanding that something which is naturally spontaneous must somehow control itself, continue itself, and never stop. So here's something to think about. What if life isn't about forcing yourself to survive, but about fully being alive while you're here? This is the trap, the double bind. It's the feeling that something must happen, even though it's only truly meaningful if it happens freely. This kind of pressure starts early. Most children grow up being told they must do something, behave, succeed, be kind, but only if they do it voluntarily. That's the impossible loop. You're required to be free. In the same way, when we say to ourselves, you must go on, it creates a silent pressure. The reason we feel this way is because we're not fully living in the present moment. We're always looking ahead, imagining that true happiness or peace will come later, after the next goal, the next achievement, or some future success. But don't fool yourself. That's a trap too. Only those who haven't really looked closely keep putting all their hope in the future, as if life will start someday. So let me ask you, what would change if you stopped chasing the future and started truly living in the now?